Today we are learning from the Tuskegee study, Ethics, Law, and Caring for All People. This is for my HCM 442 class at Franklin University. So, first of all, hello, my name is Natasha, and today we are going to learn about the Tuskegee study of syphilis. This is important because it teaches us why ethics, honesty, and respect matter in healthcare. It also helps us understand how to care for people from all backgrounds with fairness and compassion. Well, why does this training matter? Well, it matters because trust is the heart of healthcare. When people trust us, they feel safe, they feel heard, they feel cared for. And in my own work as a medical assisting educator, I see every day how much trust means. I've also lived in times where fairness and honesty mattered deeply, like when I returned home from FMLA and had to advocate for myself. The Tuskegee study shows what happens when trust is broken, and it shows us what can go wrong when ethics are ignored, and it reminds us why we must always protect our patients. So I just want to talk a little bit about a few things like informed consent. Informed consent is giving patients clear information about treatment, risk, and choices that they can make on their own and make their own best decisions. Beneficence is doing what is best for the patient and preventing harm, while justice is treating all patients fairly and equally regardless of background or income. And the law that protects patients' privacy and keeps medical information confidential is HIPAA. Cultural competency is the understanding and respecting different cultures, beliefs, and backgrounds in healthcare. Now, patient-centered care is healthcare that focuses on the patient's needs, preferences, and that have involvements in their decision. So, a little background of the Tuskegee study. It began in 1932 in Alabama. 600 black men were enrolled, and most of them had syphilis. Um, but they were never told the truth. They were told they were being treated for something called bad blood. They were not told they had a serious disease, and they were not given real treatment. Even when penicillin became the cure in 1947, the men were still denied medicine. Now, this study continued for 40 years. Let me ask you a question. Can you imagine believing doctors were helping you only to learn years later that treatment was intentionally withheld? So you'll ask, well, why did these men join this study? Well, many of these men joined the study because they trusted the doctors and believed they were going to receive real medical treatment. And at the time, healthcare was difficult to access, especially for poor families that were black living in rural Alabama. The men hoped the study would help them feel better and improve their health, and some participants could not afford regular doctor visits, so the offer of free care sounded like a valuable opportunity. Many of them likely did not understand medical research and trusted the healthcare professionals to do what was right. Well, one of the reasons was, again, the poverty in the area. The study took place in Macon County, Alabama during the Great Depression, where many families in that area lived in severe poverty, and a large number of the men were sharecroppers, meaning they worked on farms owned by other people and they earned very little money. Education levels were often low, and access to healthcare was extremely limited. Because of these difficult conditions, the men especially were vulnerable to being taken advantage of, and researchers knew the participants depended on the free services that were being offered. Now, there's the false promises of free healthcare. This is where the men were promised free medical exams, meals, transportation, and even burial insurance if they stayed in the study. Researchers presented the study as medical treatment, even though the men were not actually being cured. This created a false sense of trust and security, and the participants believed that doctors were helping them when in reality, important treatment was being withheld. And again, even after penicillin became available as a cure for syphilis, the men were intentionally prevented from receiving it so researchers could continue to study this disease. So why the study was wrong? Well, first of all, the Tuskegee study began in 1932 in Macon County, Alabama, and was conducted by the United States Public Health Service. The study included 600 black men, many of whom were poor sharecroppers with limited access to health care, and about 399 of those men had syphilis, while the others did not and were used as a comparison group. The men were told they were being treated for something called bad blood, which is a common term used at that time for illnesses like fatigue, anemia, or even infections. However, they were never actually told they had syphilis. Researchers promised the men free medical exams, meals, and transportation, again, and even that burial insurance to encourage them to stay in the study, and many of those participants trusted the doctors and believed they were receiving that medical care. One of the most heartbreaking parts of this study is that even after penicillin became available, the recommended cure for syphilis in 1947, the treatment again was still intentionally withheld. Now, this study continued for 40 years, finally ending in 1972 after there was a public outrage and the media started covering and exposing everything that was happening. Now, this history is important because it reminds us of how vulnerable patients can be when health workers abuse positions of trust. The study was wrong because it broke almost every rule we follow in healthcare. Um, and, we're going to talk about honesty. It's one of the foundations of healthcare. Without honesty, trust disappears and patients can be harmed emotionally, physically, and mentally. And one of the biggest problems was the lack of informed consent. And informed consent means patients fully understand their condition, their treatment, and the possible risk, and have the choice to say yes or no. But the men were never given that choice because they were never again told the truth. Of course, there's always some ethical issues. There were many of the ethical problems in this study because, one, there was no informed consent. There was no respect for persons. There was no beneficence, which means doing good and preventing harm. Again, there was no justice because only poor men were targeted. And when I teach my students, I remind them that ethics is not just a rule, it's a promise we make to every patient. Let me ask you, how would you feel if this happened to your family? Would patients trust healthcare workers after this? And what responsibilities do we have today because of this history? Now, let's talk about beneficence, justice, and respect for persons. You keep hearing the word beneficence. It means doing good and protecting patients from harm in healthcare. This means providers should always act in the patient's best interest by giving proper treatment, prevent suffering, and promote healthy and safety environments. In the Tuskegee study, beneficence was ignored because the men were denied treatment even after a cure for syphilis became available. And instead of helping the participants, researchers allowed them to become sicker so they could still continue to study this disease. So, of course, there's legal issues, and this study also broke important legal principles. The men had a right to treatment, but they were denied medicine. They had a right to privacy, but their information was not protected. They had a right to safety, but they were put in danger. And they had a right to stop participating, but they were never told they could leave. Many of the laws we follow today exist because of what happened in Tuskegee. And some men died from the untreated syphilis, and many of their families were affected too. So it had an impact on society because the Tuskegee study caused deep pain in the Black community and across the country. Many people lost trust in doctors and hospitals, and even today, some families still fear about healthcare because of this history. This is why cultural competency, oh my goodness, matters. We must understand people's backgrounds, fears, and experiences. Trust is something we learn. So let's talk a little bit more about what IBRs do. IRB stand for Institutional Review Board. An IRB is a group of people responsible for reviewing the research studies before they begin to make sure participants are protected. The board usually includes healthcare professionals, researchers, and community members. IRBs review studies to make sure the research is ethical and risks are minimized and informed consent is provided. That way, participants are treated fairly. They also monitor studies while they are happening to help ensure safety rules are being followed. Because of the Tuskegee study, IRBs became an important part of protecting human subjects in research. Now, why does research oversight matter? Well, research oversight matters because it helps prevent abuse, dishonesty, and harm to patients or study participants. Medical research can lead to important discoveries, but it must be done responsibly and ethically. Oversight ensures that researchers follow laws, protect privacy, they explain risk, honesty, and treat participants with respect. Without oversight, people could be taken advantage of or harmed, as happened during the Tuskegee study. Today's research oversight helps build public trust and ensures that medical progress does not come at the expense of human rights and safety. Why this matters today? Well, even though the Tuskegee study ended many years ago, its effects are still felt today. Some people remain fearful of hospitals, doctors, or medical research because of past mistreatment. This can lead to people avoiding screenings, vaccines, or even medical care. As healthcare workers, we must help rebuild trust through honesty, respect, and compassion. Now, diversity and inclusion in healthcare also matter because patients deserve to feel understood and represented. Now, again, what do IRBs actually do? Well, the Institutional Review Boards, or IRB, review research studies to make sure participants are treated safely, fairly, and ethically. They help protect people from harm and make sure informed consent is provided. And why does research oversight matter? Well, research oversight is important because it helps prevent abuse, it protects patients' rights, and ensures studies follow ethical and legal rules. It helps build trust and keeps patients safe. The impact on healthcare happened because of Tuskegee. Many new rules were created to protect patients. We now have the Belmont Report. We have the National Research Act, and we have the Institutional Review Board, also called the IRBs. We have stronger informed consent rules. We have better protection for human subjects in research, and all these rules help to keep our patients safe. So the ethical and legal tools we use today, as you can see, there's a whole list of them. We use many tools to protect patients. We follow code of ethics. We follow HIPAA to protect privacy. We use informed consent forms. We require IRB approval for research. We teach cultural competency, and we practice patient-centered care. Healthcare workers also have a responsibility to advocate for patients and speak up if something feels unsafe or unethical. This is so important because reporting unethical behavior is important because it helps prevent harm and this helps protect patient rights. Ethics in healthcare is also a team effort. Doctors, nurses, medical assistants, educators, and other healthcare professionals must work together to provide safe, respectful, and honest care. In my own teachings, I use checklists, visuals, and real-world examples to help students understand these ideals clearly. And how can we prevent harm today? Well, we can prevent harm by doing simple but powerful things. We tell the truth in clear, simple language. We ask for permission before any treatment. We protect patient information. And we treat all patients fairly. And we also listen to their cultural needs. We speak up when something feels wrong and we follow laws and ethical rules. Then this is how we honor the people who were harmed in Tuskegee. Um, the Tuskegee study is a painful part of our history, but it teaches us a powerful lesson. We must always protect our patients. We must be honest. We must respect every person, and we must never forget what happens when ethics are ignored. And together we can build a healthy healthcare system that is safe, fair, and worthy in trust. And, that's my final thoughts. And I just want to say this is in memory for all those who lost their lives. And I just want to say thank you for coming because the Tuskegee study is a painful part of our history, but it teaches us a powerful lesson. Again, we must always protect our patients. We must be honest and we must respect every person. And we must never forget what happens when ethics are ignored. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this PowerPoint, and we'll talk to you soon. Here are references for your information.